My wife kissed another man at our anniversary party. She called me a cuckold in front of everyone. Then she left with him, and I just stood there and watched. Everyone thought I was pathetic. They pitied me. Some laughed. But what they didn't know was that this was exactly what I wanted to happen. Stay until the end, because this story isn't what you think it is. What happened next destroyed everything she held dear, and she never saw it coming. This is the story of how one humiliating night became the first move in a game she didn't even know she was playing. I'll never forget the taste of champagne in my mouth when I saw my wife's tongue slip between Brandon Harwick's lips. The party was supposed to celebrate our 10th anniversary. 10 years of marriage to Melissa Chin Morrison, the woman who once told me I was the only man she'd ever truly love. The penthouse apartment we'd rented overlooked downtown Chicago, floor-to-ceiling windows revealing a city that sparkled like scattered diamonds on black velvet. 73 people had gathered to celebrate our decade together. Colleagues from my firm, friends from Melissa's gallery, neighbors we'd known for years, family members who'd flown in from 3 different states. I'd spent weeks planning every detail, the catering from that French restaurant she loved, the string quartet playing in the corner, the ice sculpture of 2 swans with intertwined necks that was already starting to melt under the warm lights. I was standing near the bar, talking with my law partner Robert Chun about a case we were working on, when I heard her laugh, that particular laugh she'd developed in the past 6 months, higher and more performative than her real one. I turned and saw them together on the far side of the room, near the windows where the city lights framed them like a movie scene. Brandon had his hand on the small of her back, exactly where I used to touch her when we danced. He was tall, movie star handsome in that effortless way that made men like me feel inadequate, with his perfectly styled hair and his custom-tailored suit that probably cost more than my monthly salary. He owned 3 art galleries in Chicago, which is how Melissa had met him, or so she told me when she first mentioned his name 4 months ago. The music was Vivaldi, I remember that specifically, and it swelled to a crescendo just as she tilted her face toward his. Time didn't slow down the way they describe it in movies. It jerked forward in stuttering frames, my brain trying to process what my eyes were seeing. Her hand came up to touch his face. His mouth descended to meet hers. And then they were kissing, really kissing, the kind of passionate embrace that made it clear this wasn't their first time. People around them stopped talking mid-sentence. My colleague Sarah gasped audibly. Someone dropped a glass, and it shattered on the marble floor with a sound like breaking ice. Robert grabbed my arm, his fingers digging into my sleeve. Jesus, man, are you seeing this? His voice sounded like it was coming from underwater, distant and distorted. I couldn't move. My feet felt bolted to the floor. My entire body turned to stone while my mind screamed at me to do something. Anything. The kiss lasted 7 seconds. I counted them, each one an eternity. When they finally broke apart, Melissa's eyes found mine across the room. There was no shock in her expression, no guilt or shame. Instead, she smiled. It was the cruelest smile I'd ever seen, cold and sharp as a blade made of ice. She said something to Brandon, and they started walking toward me. The crowd parted like the Red Sea, everyone stepping back to create a pathway through the center of the room. The quartet had stopped playing. 73 pairs of eyes were now focused on the 3 of us. Me frozen by the bar, them advancing with the confidence of people who held all the power. Melissa's red dress clung to her body, the dress I'd bought her last Christmas, and I noticed she was wearing different perfume than usual, something heavier and more sensual that Brandon had probably given her. "Hello, David," she said when they reached me, her voice carrying across the silent room. "I want you to meet Brandon. Actually, you've met before, haven't you? At the gallery opening in March? But you didn't know then that he's been fucking me for the past 6 months." The word hung in the air like a bomb just before detonation. Someone behind me made a choking sound. My mother, standing near the windows with my father, let out a small cry. "Every Tuesday when I told you I had yoga class? Every Saturday when I said I was doing inventory at the gallery? Every time you fell asleep on the couch watching your stupid legal dramas? I was texting him, planning our next time together." My mouth was dry, my throat closed. I couldn't have spoken if I'd wanted to. Brandon smirked at me, his hand possessively on Melissa's hip, His fingers splayed across the fabric of her dress. "No hard feelings, man," he said, his voice dripping with false sympathy. "Sometimes these things just happen. Chemistry, you know?" He shrugged as if he'd just told me it might rain tomorrow. Not that he'd been systematically destroying my marriage for half a year. Melissa stepped closer to me, so close I could smell that unfamiliar perfume mixed with champagne on her breath. "You want to know the funny thing, David? You never even noticed. You were so wrapped up in your boring little life, your predictable routines, your missionary position twice a month sex life that you couldn't see what was happening right in front of your face. You're pathetic." She turned to address the room, raising her voice so everyone could hear. "My husband is a cuckold. That's the technical term, isn't it? A man who lets another man fuck his wife." The room erupted in shocked murmurs, gasps, nervous laughter from some of the younger guests who didn't know how to process what they were witnessing. My best friend Jason pushed through the crowd, his face red with anger. "Melissa, what the hell is wrong with you? This is insane." She ignored him completely, her eyes locked on mine. "I'm leaving now, with Brandon. We're flying to Paris tonight. First class, staying at the Ritz, all the things you could never afford on your sad little lawyer salary. Don't wait up." She laughed at her own joke. "Actually, don't wait at all. I'll send my attorney to discuss the divorce." Jason grabbed my shoulder. "Say something. Do something. Don't just stand there." But I couldn't. My legs were shaking, my hands trembling so badly I had to grip the edge of the bar to stay upright. Brandon pulled Melissa close and kissed her again. Longer this time, his hands roaming over her body in front of everyone. In front of my mother, my colleagues, our friends. When they finally broke apart, he looked at me and winked. "Thanks for the party, David. Great champagne." They walked toward the door together, Melissa's heels clicking on the marble floor in a rhythm that sounded like a countdown. No one tried to stop them. No one knew what to do. The door opened and closed, and they were gone. The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by the sound of my mother sobbing and someone's whispered, "Oh my God." I stood there, still gripping the bar, staring at the door they'd walked through. My throat was raw, though I hadn't screamed. My eyes burned, though I hadn't cried. People started moving again, conversations resuming in hushed, urgent tones. Sarah approached me tentatively. "David, I'm so sorry. Do you want me to? Should I call someone?" I finally found my voice, though it sounded like it belonged to someone else. "No," I said quietly. "I'm fine." "Fine?" Jason exploded. "Fine? Your wife just humiliated you in front of everyone you know and left with her lover. You're not fine." He was right, of course. I wasn't fine. But as I looked around the room at all those pitying faces, at my mother crying in my father's arms, at my colleagues already backing away as if failure was contagious, I felt something unexpected rising in my chest. Not pain, not rage, but something colder, something patient, something that had been waiting for exactly this moment. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out my phone. My hands had stopped shaking. I opened the recording app and stopped the audio file that had been running since the party started. 2 hours and 17 minutes of crystal clear audio, including every word Melissa had just said. I looked at the timestamp, 9:47 p.m., October 12th, 2024, and I felt my lips curve into something that might have been a smile. "Actually," I said, still looking at my phone, "I think I'm better than fine." Jason stared at me like I'd lost my mind. Maybe I had. Or maybe, for the first time in 6 months, I was thinking clearly. The game had begun. The first morning after was the hardest because for exactly 4 seconds after I woke up, I forgot it had happened. I rolled over expecting to find Melissa's warmth beside me, that familiar landscape of her body that I'd mapped over 10 years of mornings. Instead, I found cold sheets and the devastating rush of memory that hit me like a physical blow. The party, the kiss, the words she'd spoken in front of everyone. I lay there staring at the ceiling, at the crack that ran from the light fixture toward the window that we'd always meant to fix, and felt the weight of silence pressing down on me like water at the bottom of an ocean. The apartment felt different without her, larger and emptier, filled with negative space where her presence used to be. Her coffee mug still sat on the bathroom counter, lipstick stains on the rim. Her robe hung on the back of the door. Her magazines were stacked on the end table, evidence of a life that had ended in the space of 7 seconds. My phone had 37 missed calls and 62 text messages. I scrolled through them without reading, my thumb moving mechanically across the screen. My mother had called 6 times. Jason had left 11 messages, increasingly frantic. Sarah from work had texted, "Please let me know you're okay. Everyone is worried." Robert had written, "Take all the time you need. Don't worry about the Henderson case." Even people I barely knew had reached out, their messages dripping with pity that made my skin crawl. The narrative had already been written. David Morrison, the pathetic cuckold lawyer whose wife humiliated him publicly. Poor David. Broken David. David who wasn't man enough to keep his wife satisfied. I got up and walked to the kitchen, my bare feet cold on the hardwood floors. The caterers had left everything spotless after the party. All evidence of celebration erased except for a single champagne flute forgotten on the windowsill. I picked it up and turned it in the morning light, watching rainbows dance across the walls. Melissa had held this glass at some point. Maybe it had touched her lips before Brandon's mouth did. I set it down carefully instead of smashing it, which is what the old David would have done. The one who felt things immediately and expressed them honestly. The new David, the one who'd been born in that moment when he felt his lips curve into a smile, understood the value of patience. The second day, Jason showed up at my door at 7 in the morning with coffee and bagels and the aggressive concern of a best friend who'd known me since college. "You can't just hide in here," he said, pushing past me into the apartment. He was still in his gym clothes, his dark hair damp with sweat, and he smelled like effort and determination. "You look like shit, by the way. When's the last time you slept?" I hadn't slept, not really. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her face. Not from the party, but from earlier in our marriage, from the good years before something shifted. I saw her on our wedding day, laughing as I fumbled with her veil. I saw her in the hospital after her father died, vulnerable and broken in my arms. I saw her last Christmas morning, opening the present I'd saved for months to buy, her face glowing with genuine joy. "I'm fine," I told Jason, and he threw a bagel at my head. "Stop saying you're fine. You're not fine. Your wife cheated on you for 6 months and then publicly destroyed you. You're allowed to be angry. You're allowed to fall apart." He was pacing now, his energy filling the room, making the walls feel too close. "We should key his car. Better yet, we should go to his gallery and, I don't know, break something. Expensive something. You want me to hit him? I'll hit him. I've been wanting to hit someone since Saturday night." I looked at my best friend, at his righteous anger on my behalf, and felt something like affection mixed with pity. Jason was a good man, loyal to his core, but he thought in straight lines. Action and reaction. Cause and effect. He couldn't see the larger pattern, the longer game. "Do you remember Elena Hartwell?" I asked him. Jason stopped pacing, confused by the non sequitur. "Your ex-girlfriend? From law school? What about her?" I walked to the window and looked out at the Chicago skyline, gray and misty under October clouds. "She cheated on you with that professor. You found out and confronted her immediately, made a scene, yelled at her in the library where everyone could hear. Do you remember what happened?" Jason's face darkened. "She got engaged to him 2 months later. They're married now. Have a kid. What's your point?" I turned to face him. "My point is that sometimes the direct approach is the wrong approach. Sometimes you have to be patient." The third day, I went back to work. Everyone in the office had heard what happened. In the age of smartphones, I'd be shocked if there wasn't video footage circulating on social media, though I'd specifically avoided looking for it. When I walked into the building, conversations stopped. People looked away or offered tight, uncomfortable smiles. The receptionist's eyes welled with tears when she saw me, which was almost worse than if she'd laughed. Robert pulled me into his office immediately. "David, take more time. A week, 2 weeks, however long you need. We can handle your cases." His concern was genuine, but it made my jaw clench. I don't need time off. I need to work. Sarah found me in the break room around noon, pouring coffee into a mug that read World's Okayest Lawyer. A gift from Melissa 3 years ago. How are you holding up? She asked gently. Sarah was 32, brilliant, with a mind like a steel trap and a heart that sometimes got her into trouble with clients who mistook her kindness for weakness. She'd been at the party with her husband Mark, and I remembered the look of horror on her face when Melissa started speaking. Everyone's talking about it. I told them to shut up, but you know how offices are. Let them talk, I said, and I meant it. Sarah studied me with sharp brown eyes that missed nothing. You're different. Since Saturday, you're, I don't know, calmer? It's weird. Most people in your situation would be a mess. I sipped my coffee, considering how much to reveal. Maybe I am a mess. Maybe I'm just good at hiding it. She didn't look convinced. Or maybe you knew. Is that possible? Did you know about the affair? The question hung between us, dangerous and perceptive. Sarah had always been too smart for her own good. What if I did? I asked quietly. What if I'd known for months? What would that make me? Either stupid or strategic, she said immediately. And you're not stupid. She crossed her arms, leaning against the counter. What are you planning, David? Before I could answer, my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Melissa Morrison has listed you as a reference for a loan application. Please confirm your relationship status and annual income. I stared at the message, pieces clicking together in my mind. She's applying for a loan, I said aloud. Sarah looked over my shoulder. Why would she need a loan? She works at that gallery, right? Must make decent money. That's when I started laughing. Couldn't help it. The sound bubbled up from somewhere deep in my chest, sharp and bitter and tinged with something that might have been hysteria or might have been triumph. Sarah grabbed my arm. David, you're scaring me. What's going on? I showed her the text message. The gallery pays her a base salary of $48,000 a year. Brandon owns the galleries, but his business is leveraged to the hilt. I had a PI look into his finances 3 months ago. He's drowning in debt, keeping up appearances with maxed-out credit cards and loans from his father's trust fund. They're both broke, Sarah. They're both living on illusions. You hired a private investigator? Sarah's voice was quiet, almost awed. 3 months ago, the day after I found lipstick on Melissa's collar that wasn't her shade. The day I stopped being the trusting husband and started being the lawyer who sees the truth. I took another sip of coffee. Brandon's business is failing. He's been using investor money to fund his lifestyle. And Melissa, my beloved wife who called me pathetic, has been maxing out our joint credit cards for months thinking I wouldn't notice. They think they're running away to Paris together, but they're actually running toward a cliff. The look on Sarah's face was equal parts shock and admiration. How long have you been planning this? I thought about the recording app on my phone, about the evidence I'd been gathering, about the lawyer I'd already contacted in secret. 6 months, I admitted. Since the first time she came home smelling like his cologne. Since the first lie. I could have confronted her then, could have filed for divorce quietly. But where's the justice in that? Where's the consequence? My voice dropped lower. She wanted to humiliate me publicly, so I let her, because now everyone saw it. Everyone heard her. And when this is over, everyone will know who she really is. Sarah was quiet for a long moment. When she finally spoke, her voice was thoughtful. You know what? I take back what I said. You're not a mess. You're terrifying. She left the break room, leaving me alone with my coffee and my phone and the satisfaction of knowing that Melissa had no idea what was coming. She thought she'd won. She thought she'd escaped into a better life with a better man. But she'd actually just walked into a trap that had taken me half a year to set. That night, I pulled out a box from the back of my closet, the one I'd been filling for months. Inside were bank statements showing Melissa's spending sprees on our joint accounts. Credit card bills for purchases she'd told me were work-related, but were actually romantic dinners with Brandon. Emails I'd recovered from her laptop before she changed the password. Text messages from her to Brandon discussing how much she hated our boring life together. Photos the PI had taken of them together at hotels, restaurants, his apartment. And recordings, hours of recordings, including the one from the party. I spread everything out on my home office floor like puzzle pieces and looked at the complete picture. This wasn't just evidence of infidelity. This was evidence of systematic financial abuse, deliberate cruelty, premeditated humiliation. In Illinois, a state that technically had no-fault divorce, this was the kind of evidence that could still matter when it came to asset division and spousal support. Melissa wanted to leave me with nothing, not even dignity. What she didn't understand was that I'd been preparing to give her exactly what she deserved. Nothing but the reputation she'd earned and the consequences she'd refused to consider. My phone rang. My mother. I let it go to voicemail, unable to handle her worried questions or my father's strained attempts at consolation. They'd been married 42 years, my parents, and they couldn't comprehend what had happened at the party. To them, marriage was sacred, vows were unbreakable, and public humiliation was something that happened in television shows, not to their son. I talked to them eventually, explain everything when it was over. For now, I needed them to think I was broken. I needed everyone to think that. The fourth day, I received an email from Melissa's lawyer, notice of intent to file for divorce. The letter was formal, cold, listing irreconcilable differences as grounds and demanding I vacate our shared apartment. At the bottom, almost as an afterthought, was a clause stating that Melissa would be seeking full ownership of the apartment, the car we'd bought together last year, and half my retirement account. She wanted everything and was counting on me being too destroyed to fight back. I read the letter 3 times, then filed it carefully with the other documents. Evidence. Ammunition. Rope for her to hang herself with. Jason called again. Divorce papers? Already? Jesus, David. She's really going for the throat. He sounded outraged on my behalf. Ready to go to war. What are you going to do? I looked at the evidence spread across my office floor, at months of careful documentation, at the trap that was about to spring shut. I'm going to hire the best divorce attorney in Chicago, I said. And then I'm going to show Melissa Morrison exactly what happens when you underestimate the man you betrayed. In the window's reflection, I saw myself smile. Cold, calculating, patient. The David from before the party was gone. The David who'd stood frozen while his wife kissed another man was dead. What remained was someone else entirely. Someone who understood that revenge was a dish best served after your enemy thought they'd already won. Margaret Chin didn't look like someone who could destroy your life with a smile, but that's exactly what made her the best divorce attorney in Chicago. She was 56 years old, barely 5 feet tall, with silver-streaked hair cut in a precise bob and glasses that made her look like somebody's favorite aunt. Her office in the Loop was decorated with family photos and abstract art, soft lighting that made you feel comfortable enough to confess your darkest secrets. I'd heard about her from other lawyers at my firm, whispered stories of billionaires who'd walked into her office thinking they'd controlled the narrative and walked out penniless. They called her the Silver Dragon, though never to her face. I called her at 9 in the morning on day 5 and had an appointment by noon. That's how good she was. Mr. Morrison, she said, shaking my hand with a grip surprisingly strong for such a small woman. I've heard about your situation. I'm sorry for what you've been through. The sympathy in her voice sounded genuine, but her eyes were calculating, already assessing me as a client and as a case. I sat down in the leather chair across from her massive desk and placed the box of evidence between us. I don't want sympathy, I told her. I want justice. She raised one eyebrow. Those aren't always the same thing in divorce court. They're going to be in this case. I opened the box and started laying out documents. Bank statements first, showing Melissa's spending patterns over 6 months. $17,000 in charges I hadn't approved or known about. Then the credit card bills, another $12,000 in debt she'd racked up on our joint cards. Restaurant receipts from places we'd never been together. Hotel charges for rooms I'd never slept in. Margaret's expression didn't change as she examined each piece of paper, but I saw her fingers tap once against the desk. A tell I recognized from my own courtroom experience. Interest. Anticipation. This is thorough, she said quietly. Most people who come to me after infidelity bring emotions and accusations. You've brought evidence. I'm a lawyer, I reminded her. I know what matters in court. I pulled out the next layer, printed emails and text messages. Melissa to Brandon. He suspects nothing. He's too stupid to see what's happening right in front of him. Brandon to Melissa. When we're together in Paris, we'll laugh about his pathetic face. Melissa to Brandon. I can't wait to take everything and leave him with nothing. He deserves it for being so boring. Margaret read in silence, her face still carefully neutral, but I saw her jaw tighten. How did you obtain these communications? Legally, I assured her. Joint computer, joint accounts, and some information gathered by a licensed private investigator. Everything admissible. I reached into the box again and pulled out my phone. And I have audio from the party. 2 hours and 17 minutes of clear recording, including every word she said to me and about me in front of 73 witnesses. I played 30 seconds of it. Melissa's voice, crystal clear, saying, "My husband is a cuckold, and you're pathetic." Margaret listened with her eyes closed, and when I stopped the playback, she opened them and looked at me with something new in her expression. Respect. Mr. Morrison, this is the most comprehensive evidence package I've seen in 20 years of practicing divorce law. This isn't just a case. This is a weapon. She sat back in her chair. What exactly do you want from this divorce? Everything, I said simply. I want the apartment because I paid the down payment with inheritance from my grandmother. I want full ownership of both cars because I made every payment. I want my retirement account protected because Illinois law says marital assets can be divided inequitably in cases of extreme misconduct. I want her to pay back every penny she stole from our joint accounts. And I want everyone who saw her humiliate me to see her lose everything she thought she'd won. Margaret was quiet for a long moment, studying me with those sharp eyes. You understand that in Illinois we're a no-fault divorce state. Her infidelity won't matter as much as you think it should. It matters for dissipation of assets, I countered. She spent marital funds on an extramarital affair. The court can reimburse me for that. It matters for my claim that I should keep the apartment. Why should I be forced from my home because she decided to cheat? And it matters for public opinion, which sometimes influences judges whether they admit it or not. You've done your homework. Margaret pulled a yellow legal pad toward her and started making notes with a fountain pen. Let's talk about strategy. Your wife's attorney will argue irreconcilable differences, try to get a quick settlement, 50-50 division of assets. They'll want to avoid trial because they know what you have. We're going to refuse every settlement offer. We're going to force this into court, into deposition, into the light of day where every detail gets examined. She looked up at me. This won't be fast and it won't be clean. She'll fight back. Can you handle that? I've been handling it for 6 months, I said. I can handle 6 more. Margaret smiled then, a real smile that transformed her face from kindly aunt to warrior queen. Then let's destroy her case before she knows what hit her. I need you to document everything going forward. Every communication from her, every attempt at contact, every social media post. Does she post on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter? Instagram mainly. She's been documenting her new life with Brandon. Restaurants, wine, romantic sunsets. All with our money. Perfect. Margaret made another note. Social media is a gift in divorce cases. People think they're showing the world how happy they are, but what they're really doing is creating evidence of their spending habits and lifestyle expectations. If she's posting photos from expensive restaurants while claiming she needs spousal support, that's leverage. She tapped her pen against the pad. What about Brandon Harwick? You mentioned he owns art galleries. 3 of them, all mortgaged to the ceiling. He's got 2 business partners who don't know he's been embezzling from company accounts to fund his lifestyle. I pulled out another file from my box. Financial records my PI had obtained through some creative investigation. He owes his father's estate $200,000. He's behind on rent for all 3 gallery locations. He's about to collapse financially, but he's been hiding it behind custom suits and leased luxury cars. Margaret's smile grew wider. So your wife left you for a man who's even more broke than she is. They deserve each other. She stood up and walked to her window, looking out over Chicago's downtown. Here's what we're going to do. First, we're going to freeze all joint accounts immediately. Every penny she thought she could access will be locked down. Second, we're going to file a motion to have her removed from the apartment. You can prove you paid the down payment, you can prove she committed misconduct, you can argue she abandoned the marital home. Third, we're going to start discovery, depositions, interrogatories, document requests. We're going to make this so expensive and so public that Brandon's business partners find out what he's been doing. You want to go after him too? I hadn't considered that angle. I want to make sure your wife understands the full consequences of her choices. She picked Brandon over you because she thought he was the better option. Richer, more exciting, more sophisticated. When he loses everything, when his galleries shut down and his partners sue him for fraud, when he can't afford to buy her champagne anymore, she'll realize she threw away a stable life for a fantasy. That's justice, Mr. Morrison. That's revenge. I felt something cold and satisfying settle in my chest. This woman understood. What about the humiliation? The public aspect? Margaret turned from the window. Illinois has alienation of affection laws on the books, though they're rarely used. It's a long shot, but we could potentially sue Brandon for damages related to the affair. Even if we don't win, the threat of it would force him to spend money on lawyers he doesn't have. But more importantly, everything we file becomes public record. Court documents, depositions, financial disclosures. I know several journalists who specialize in business fraud. If Brandon's embezzlement becomes news, if his galleries collapse publicly, if his partners sue him, she shrugged. Sometimes the court of public opinion is more effective than actual court. We spent another hour going over strategy, discussing timelines, planning our approach. Margaret would file our response to Melissa's divorce petition within the week, along with counterclaims for dissipation of assets, emotional distress, and exclusive use of the marital home. She'd also send a letter to Brandon's business partners, not making accusations, just asking questions about financial irregularities that would prompt them to audit their books. Trust me, Margaret said. They'll find what we want them to find. As I was leaving, she called me back. Mr. Morrison? David. I turned. One more thing. Your wife is going to realize very soon that she made a mistake. Not leaving you. She seems committed to that, but underestimating you. When she realizes you're not going to roll over, when she sees we're freezing accounts and filing motions and exposing everything, she's going to try to come back. She'll apologize, cry, say she made a terrible error. Don't fall for it. I won't, I promised. Good, because women like Melissa don't change. They just get better at hiding who they really are. You've seen her true face now. Remember it. I left Margaret's office feeling something I hadn't felt in months. Hope. Not the naive hope of reconciliation, but the cold, hard hope of someone who just hired an expert to help him win a war. My phone buzzed as I walked to my car. A text from Melissa's lawyer. We'd like to meet to discuss settlement terms. When are you available? I forwarded the message to Margaret and got a response within 30 seconds. Tell him never. We're going to trial. I smiled and typed the reply exactly as Margaret instructed. 2 minutes later, another message from Melissa's attorney. I think you're making a mistake. My client is willing to be reasonable. Reasonable. The word almost made me laugh. There was nothing reasonable about what Melissa had done. Nothing reasonable about her demands for half of everything I'd worked for. Margaret was right. They wanted to settle because they knew what would happen if we went to court. That evening, I got a call from an unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered. David. Melissa's voice was tentative, uncertain in a way I'd never heard before. We need to talk. No, we don't. Your lawyer has mine's contact information. All communication goes through them. Please just listen. Why? I interrupted. So you can explain? Justify? Tell me it wasn't as bad as it looked? I have a recording, Melissa. I have 2 hours of audio from our anniversary party where you detailed exactly how little you think of me. What could you possibly say now that matters? Silence on the line. Then, I didn't know you'd be like this. You're supposed to be. She trailed off and I finished for her. Broken? Destroyed? Begging you to come back. I laughed, and it sounded harsh even to my own ears. You don't know me at all, do you? 10 years of marriage and you never saw past the surface. Brandon says, I don't care what Brandon says. In fact, you might want to ask Brandon about his business finances. Ask him where the money from his investors actually went. Ask him why he's 2 months behind on rent for all 3 galleries. Another long silence. When she spoke again, her voice was harder. You're investigating him? What is wrong with you? What's wrong with me? I kept my voice calm, controlled. I'm protecting myself from a woman who spent 6 months betraying me, who stole from joint accounts, who humiliated me in front of everyone I know, and who now wants to take everything I own. That's called being smart, not wrong. This is crazy. You're not usually, you don't. She was scrambling now, trying to reconcile the David she thought she knew with the one talking to her. People change, Melissa. Or maybe I never changed. Maybe this is who I always was, and you just never bothered to look. I hung up before she could respond. My hands were shaking, not from fear or sadness, but from adrenaline, from the rush of finally fighting back. Within 10 minutes, she called again. I declined the call and blocked her number. Whatever she had to say could go through lawyers. That's how war worked. Jason called an hour later. Dude, Melissa just showed up at my apartment crying. She says you're being cruel, that you've changed, that you won't even talk to her. Good, I said. Let her cry. Did you talk to her? I told her to leave and never contact me again. She's not my friend. She never was. She's the woman who destroyed my best friend. But David, she seemed genuinely shocked that you're not falling apart. I thought about that. She wanted me broken because it would justify her leaving. If I'm pathetic, she's the victim who escaped. If I'm strong, she's just the villain. When did you get so smart about this stuff? Jason asked. 6 months ago, I said, when I stopped being a husband and started being a strategist. The first crack in their perfect new life came 3 weeks after the party, though I didn't hear about it until later. Brandon's business partner, Thomas Liu, discovered irregularities in the gallery accounts during what he thought would be a routine quarterly review. $58,000 missing over 18 months, cleverly hidden in fake vendor payments and inflated expense reports. Thomas called Brandon into his office on a Tuesday morning. The same morning, Melissa posted an Instagram photo of them having breakfast at a cafe that charged $32 for avocado toast. By noon, Brandon was suspended pending investigation. By evening, he'd blocked Thomas's calls and was drinking scotch at noon in his apartment, while Melissa tried to understand why their credit cards were suddenly being declined. Margaret called me with the news, barely containing her satisfaction. Lou is filing criminal fraud charges. Brandon's other partner is talking to the FBI. This is falling apart faster than I expected. I asked how she knew all this and she just smiled through the phone. I have friends everywhere, David. That's why you hired me. The frozen bank accounts hit Melissa 2 days later. She tried to withdraw money for rent. Their new luxury apartment overlooking Lake Michigan cost $4,500 a month and found every joint account locked. She called me 17 times that day. I didn't answer. She left voicemails that progressed from confused to angry to panicked to desperate. David, what did you do? I can't access any money. I need to pay rent. I need groceries. Please call me back. This is insane. You can't just cut me off. David, please. But I could cut her off. Margaret had filed emergency motions arguing that Melissa had dissipated marital assets through her affair and that I needed protection from further financial abuse. The judge, a 60-year-old woman who'd heard Melissa's recorded words from the party, agreed. Every penny was frozen until the divorce was finalized. Melissa could petition for temporary support, but that would require her to disclose every expense, including the money she'd spent on Brandon. She'd have to admit under oath exactly how she'd used our money to fund her affair. I learned from Sarah that Melissa had started calling my colleagues, trying to find out what I was doing, what I was planning. She called my mother, who hung up on her. She called Jason, who told her exactly what he thought of her and suggested she never contact anyone I knew ever again. She was isolated, cut off from money and support, trapped with a man whose life was collapsing around them. The Paris trip had been cancelled, they couldn't afford it. The luxury apartment's landlord was threatening eviction. Brandon was facing criminal charges. And suddenly, the exciting new life looked more like a nightmare. The second crack came when I found out the truth about how they'd met. Not at the gallery opening in March like Melissa had told me, but at a hotel bar 14 months ago. I'd been out of town for a legal conference and she'd been, what? Looking for excitement? Validation? Someone to tell her she was special? My PI found the hotel's security footage after some creative negotiation with a sympathetic security manager. There they were, Melissa and Brandon, drunk and laughing, leaving the bar together at midnight. 14 months of lies, not 6. I sat in my apartment watching that footage on my laptop, and something broke inside me. Not my resolve, but the last remaining fragment of the man who'd loved her. I'd suspected she'd lied about the timeline, but seeing proof was different. Every anniversary, every birthday, every "I love you" for more than a year had been spoken by someone who was betraying me. I trusted her completely while she'd laughed at my trust. Margaret had been right. Melissa hadn't just made a mistake. This was who she'd always been, and I'd been too blind to see it. The deposition was scheduled for 6 weeks after the party. Melissa would have to answer questions under oath about the affair. The spending, every detail she'd hoped to hide. Her lawyer fought to avoid it, offering settlement after settlement, each one more desperate than the last. Margaret rejected them all. "We're going to trial," she kept saying. Let her squirm. But 3 days before the deposition, something happened that changed everything. Brandon tried to run. Not metaphorically, literally run. He bought a one-way ticket to Mexico using a credit card that wasn't quite maxed out and tried to leave the country before the FBI investigation concluded. Melissa found out when she came home to find him packing, their apartment already half empty of his things. They fought. Neighbors heard screaming, things breaking. She called me that night, hysterical, barely coherent. I let it go to voicemail. "David, he's leaving me. He's running away and leaving me with nothing. I don't have money for rent. I don't have anywhere to go. Please, I know I don't deserve your help, but I have nobody else. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for everything." I saved the voicemail and forwarded it to Margaret. Evidence. Proof that Melissa's perfect new life had disintegrated exactly as we'd planned. Brandon was arrested at O'Hare before his flight boarded. Apparently fleeing before a federal investigation concludes is evidence of guilt. His bail was set at $200,000. Money he absolutely didn't have. His father refused to help. His partners were suing him. The galleries declared bankruptcy within a week. The man Melissa had chosen over me, the man she'd thought was superior in every way, was going to prison. And Melissa? She moved in with her sister in a suburb 40 minutes from Chicago, sleeping on a couch in a one-bedroom apartment with 2 young nephews who didn't understand why Aunt Melissa cried all the time. She deleted her Instagram account after commenters found her profile and left messages ranging from harsh judgment to cruel mockery. She'd lost her job at the gallery. Not surprisingly, since the gallery didn't exist anymore. She was broke, homeless except for her sister's charity, and facing a divorce trial where every terrible choice she'd made would be examined in excruciating detail. The morning of the deposition, I woke up early and made myself coffee in the apartment that was now legally mine. The judge had granted my motion for exclusive use of the marital home. I walked through rooms that had once been ours and were now just mine, and I felt empty. Not triumphant, not satisfied, just hollow. I'd won. Melissa had lost everything. Brandon was destroyed. Justice had been served exactly as I'd planned for 6 months. So why did it feel like I'd lost something too? Sarah met me at Margaret's office before the deposition. She'd been helping with document organization, and somewhere in the past 6 weeks we'd become closer. Not romantically, just 2 people who understood what it meant to fight for justice in a world that often felt unjust. "You ready for this?" she asked. I nodded, adjusting my tie, the armor of professionalism I'd worn every day of my adult life. "More than ready." Melissa arrived 15 minutes late with her lawyer, a harried-looking man named Paul Kemper who probably regretted taking her case. She looked terrible, thin, pale, with dark circles under her eyes and her hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. She wouldn't look at me when she walked into the conference room. The court reporter set up her equipment while Margaret organized her files. The air was thick with tension, with everything unsaid between us. "Let's begin," Margaret said. And then, for the next 4 hours, she systematically dismantled every lie Melissa had told. Where did you meet Brandon Harwick? How long had the affair been going on? How much money did you spend on this relationship? Did you use marital funds to buy him gifts? Did you lie to your husband about where you were going? Did you understand these were joint accounts you were depleting? Did you consider the impact on your husband when you publicly humiliated him? On and on, question after question, each one a knife cutting away pretense and revealing truth. Melissa cried. She tried to deflect, to minimize, to reframe her choices as something other than betrayal. But Margaret was relentless, and the evidence was overwhelming. By the end, Melissa had admitted to 14 months of infidelity, to spending over $30,000 of our money on Brandon, to planning for months to leave me in the most hurtful way possible. Why? I finally asked, breaking my silence. It wasn't on Margaret's list of questions, but I needed to know. If you were so unhappy, why not just tell me? Why the cruelty? She looked at me then, really looked at me for the first time since the party. Her eyes were red, her face blotchy from tears. Because I wanted you to hurt the way I'd been hurting, she said quietly. What? I didn't understand. You never saw me, David. You were always working, always distracted, always putting your career first. I felt invisible in my own marriage. So when Brandon looked at me, really looked at me and made me feel special, I wanted you to feel that invisibility, that pain. She wiped her eyes. I wanted you to understand what it's like to not matter. The words hung in the room, and I felt something crack. Not in me, but in the certainty I'd built over 6 months. Had I been so focused on my career that I'd neglected her? Had I missed signs that she was unhappy? Was I partially responsible for pushing her toward someone else? So you destroyed our marriage to teach me a lesson? My voice was quiet, controlled. You spent our money, betrayed me for over a year, humiliated me publicly, all because you felt invisible? I'm not saying it was right, she said quickly. I know what I did was horrible. But David, you're not innocent in this. You checked out of our marriage long before I did. You just did it quietly while I did it spectacularly. Margaret touched my arm, a signal to stop talking, but I couldn't. If I was neglectful, you could have told me. We could have gone to counseling. We could have tried to fix things. Instead, you chose cruelty. You chose to destroy me in front of everyone we know. That wasn't about being invisible. That was about being vindictive. You're right, she whispered. Something drastic. The words hung heavy between us. I thought about Melissa's voice in that last deposition question, the hollow tone when she'd said I'd won. I thought about the woman I'd married 10 years ago, full of dreams and laughter, before life and disappointment had turned us both into people who hurt each other. What do you recommend? I asked Margaret. She considered carefully. As your lawyer? Take the settlement. You've already won everything that matters, the apartment, your assets protected, her admission of guilt on record. The trial would just be running up the score. As someone who's watched you these past months, that's your call. You've earned your revenge. Question is whether you still want it. I thought about that for 3 days. I imagined Melissa on the witness stand, being cross-examined about every detail of her affair, every lie, every cruel word. I imagined the satisfaction of watching her crumble, of having the world see her completely destroyed. And then I imagined myself afterward, standing in the rubble of our mutual destruction, surrounded by evidence of how thoroughly I'd won, and feeling nothing but emptiness. Accept the settlement, I told Margaret. She nodded slowly. I think that's wise. You've made your point. She's lost everything. Her relationship, her job, her reputation, her financial security. Sometimes mercy is more powerful than complete destruction. This isn't mercy, I said. It's just enough. I spent 6 months planning revenge, and I got it. Brandon's in prison. Melissa's broke and humiliated. I kept everything I wanted to keep. Continuing just makes me as cruel as she was. The divorce was finalized on a gray Tuesday in January, 5 months after the party. I sat in court with Margaret while Melissa and Paul Kemper sat on the other side. The judge reviewed the settlement, asked if we both agreed to terms, and signed the papers. Just like that, 10 years of marriage dissolved into legal documentation. Melissa left immediately afterward, not looking back. I stayed for a few minutes, staring at the judge's signature that ended everything. Sarah waited for me in the hallway. Over the months, our friendship had deepened into something more. Not a relationship exactly, but the possibility of one. "How do you feel?" she asked. "Free," I said, and it was partially true. And sad, and angry, and relieved. All of it at once. We walked out of the courthouse together into winter sunshine. What now? Now I figure out who I am when I'm not plotting revenge or protecting myself. Now I try to remember what it feels like to trust someone. Now I start over. 6 months later, I ran into Melissa at a coffee shop. She was behind the counter, wearing a green apron, taking someone's order. She looked different. Older, quieter, like someone who'd been through war and survived but carried the scars. Our eyes met, and for a moment, neither of us knew what to do. Then she walked over during her break. "Hi," she said. "Hi. You look good. Happy." She wasn't being sarcastic, just observational. "I'm getting there. You?" "Same. It's been hard, but I'm working on myself. Therapy. Figuring out why I did what I did." She paused. "I owe you an apology. A real one, not the court-mandated kind." "Okay." I didn't make it easy for her. I was cruel. I was selfish. I blamed you for my own unhappiness and then punished you for it in the worst way possible. You deserved better than what I gave you. She looked down at her hands. "I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know that I understand now what I did. Brandon, the affair, the party, none of that was about you not being enough. It was about me being broken and making terrible choices. Thank you for saying that," I said, and meant it. For what it's worth, I wasn't a perfect husband. I did check out. I did prioritize work over us. We both failed each other. "Maybe," she said, "but I'm the one who turned that failure into cruelty. That's on me." We talked for a few more minutes, awkward but honest, two people who destroyed each other trying to find something like peace. When I left, I realized I didn't hate her anymore. I didn't love her either. She was just someone I used to know. Someone who taught me painful lessons about trust and revenge and the cost of both. Sarah asked me later how it felt to see her. "Like closing a book I'd already finished," I said. "The story's over. Time to start a new one." A year after the party, I stood in the same apartment, my apartment now, looking at the city lights and thinking about how much had changed. The crack in the ceiling was finally fixed. The walls had been repainted. The furniture Melissa and I had chosen together had been replaced with pieces I'd selected myself. The space felt different, lighter, like a place where I could breathe instead of drowning. Sarah was in the kitchen, cooking dinner, laughing at something on her phone. We'd been dating for 4 months. Slowly, carefully, two damaged people learning to trust again. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. Jason sat on the couch with his new girlfriend, Amy, telling stories about law school that made her laugh. My parents were coming for dinner next week. Finally comfortable again after months of worried phone calls and visits where they tried to make sure I was okay. I was okay. Better than okay, actually. I'd been promoted to senior partner at the firm. I'd started running in the mornings, something I never had time for before. I'd reconnected with old friends and made new ones. I'd built a life that was mine, not ours, not overshadowed by betrayal and revenge. But sometimes, in quiet moments, I thought about the cost. The months I'd spent planning Melissa's destruction, the energy devoted to revenge, the part of myself I'd lost in the process of winning. Had it been worth it? I'd gotten justice. She'd lost everything. admitted fault, paid consequences. But I'd also lost something. The ability to be the person who didn't need revenge, who could walk away without scorching the earth behind him. Margaret called occasionally to check in, though our business was concluded. "How's the Dragon Slayer?" she'd ask, her code for asking if I was okay. "Recovering," I'd tell her. "Learning to be something other than angry." I heard from mutual acquaintances that Melissa had moved to Colorado, found a job at an art supply store, was slowly rebuilding. Brandon got 5 years for fraud and embezzlement. His galleries were sold to pay restitution to investors. His name was mud in Chicago's art community. Melissa's sister told someone who told Jason, who told me that Melissa kept a journal now, working through everything that had happened, trying to understand who she'd been and who she wanted to become. I hoped she found peace. I really did. Hating her had exhausted me. Letting go had freed me. Sarah called from the kitchen. "Dinner's ready." I walked toward the light and warmth and the sound of friends laughing, leaving the window and the memories behind. The city sparkled like it always did, indifferent to human drama, full of people fighting their own battles and nursing their own wounds. Somewhere out there, Melissa was probably looking at mountains instead of skyscrapers, starting over in ways I'd never know about. And that was okay. Our story was finished. The man who'd stood frozen at a party while his wife kissed another man was gone. The man who'd spent months plotting perfect revenge was gone too. What remained was someone more complicated. Scarred but healing, wiser but sadder, strong but aware of strength's limitations. I'd learned that revenge could be satisfying and hollow simultaneously, that winning could feel like losing, that justice and healing weren't always the same thing. I'd learned that you could do everything right and still feel wrong, that you could get everything you wanted and wonder if you should have wanted something else. "David, come on. Food's getting cold." Sarah's voice pulled me back to the present. I took one last look at the city, at my reflection in the window, older, harder, but somehow more myself than I'd been in years. Then I turned away from the past and walked toward whatever came next. The apartment door closed behind me, shutting out the cold and the memories and the ghost of who I used to be. Tomorrow I'd wake up and build another day of this new life. Tomorrow I'd keep learning how to be happy instead of victorious, how to be open instead of defended, how to be someone who could love again without fear. But tonight, I'd eat dinner with people who cared about me, laugh at Jason's terrible jokes, hold Sarah's hand across the table, and be grateful for the complicated, imperfect, hard-won peace I'd finally found. The story of my marriage ended at that party with humiliation and betrayal. But the story of my life, the real story, was just beginning, written not in revenge but in the slow, difficult work of becoming whole again. And that, I was learning, was worth more than any perfect revenge could ever be. So that's my story. My wife betrayed me, humiliated me, called me a cuckold in front of everyone I knew, and I got my revenge. I won everything I wanted to win. She lost everything she'd hoped to gain. Justice was served. But here's what nobody tells you about revenge. It doesn't heal you. It doesn't make you whole again. It just makes you someone who's very, very good at winning battles but might have lost something more important in the process. Was I right to do what I did? Was I justified in destroying her life the way she tried to destroy mine? I don't know. Some days I think I did exactly what I had to do. Other days I wonder if I became the villain of my own story. What do you think? Was my revenge justified? Or did I go too far? Leave your thoughts in the comments. And if this story made you think about betrayal, revenge, justice, and the cost of winning, hit that subscribe button. Because life is complicated, relationships are messy, and sometimes the people we think we know best are complete strangers. Thanks for watching. And remember, be careful who you underestimate. They might be planning something you never saw coming.